more money was left by the People's Partnership than we met in 2010. But since this incompetent PNM government has come into office, they have shut down several companies that used to generate US.
In the image of the United National Congress, the Member of Parliament for Couva North, Mr. Ravi Ratiram.
Political leader of the UNC, Honorable Kamla Prasad-Bisesa, my brothers and sisters, a pleasant good night to each and every one of you. Today, in our beautiful, sweet TNT, we are now standing on the brink of a food crisis. Our food security is more and more being compromised and eroded by this wicked, uncaring, dictatorial, Rowley regime. I am certain, brothers and sisters, that all of you have noticed and recognized the increase and escalation of the food prices, be it in the market or on the supermarket shelves. Throughout our country, Trinidad and even in Tobago, citizens have all been complaining of the increases in food prices. The cost of basic foodstuff has become unrealistic, even with Colin Imbert's Mama Guy pigtail budget, where he zero-rated a few food items. But I want to ask this evening, what about the 7,000 food items that were zero-rated by our political leader, the Honorable Kamla Prasad-Bisesa, when she was our Prime Minister? Since 2015, brothers and sisters, this Rowley-led government, just 1 month after they came into office, in their very first budget, they returned VAT on those 7,000 food items. So when they now come to remove a VAT on a few food items, they are not doing no grand event, but what they are simply trying to do is to undo the damage and the suffering that they have placed on our citizens, on our poor and vulnerable citizens who are affected the most. Brothers and sisters, the price of some agriculture inputs have already increased within recent time, and suppliers have already signaled to the agro-shop that the price of certain chemicals are going to increase from as early as next week. What this means, brothers and sisters, is that the cost of production is going up once again. And if the cost of production rises, who do you think it is going to affect the most? Who do you think is going to feel it? Do you think it will be Faris with the millions of state rent money? Or Stuart with the millions of the family business which he has recused himself from the cabinet on multiple occasions? No, brothers and sisters, it is going to be you, the consumers, the customers, the ordinary citizens who will feel it the most and who are going to have to pay these higher increased prices because of the Rowley PNM mismanagement and incompetence. My colleague, the MP for Mayaro, MP Rushton Parry, spoke to the savings that could have been seen if the government used pre-COVID cost insurance and freight, the CIF values, to levy custom duty and VAT, so that importers can get an ease up and thus pass these savings on to the consumers. Some countries, like right next door in Guyana, they have adopted this approach, but unfortunately, we do not have a government that cares about anyone but themselves. We have a government filled with useless and incompetent ministers who have been sleeping on the job for the past 6 years. And it is because of this incompetence that the Rowley-led PNM has mismanaged our economy, so that our farmers, our wholesalers, and our retailers, they cannot afford to absorb these rising costs. Because you see, brothers and sisters, the price of agricultural produce, like so many other things, is based on the principle of supply and demand. So when supply is low, even with no change in demand, prices increase. And what are the things that would cause a shortfall in supply? Well, apart from a shortage of input factor like animal feed, which we have spoken about in the past, other things like predial larceny, which is the theft of agricultural produce, and flooding have both a direct and indirect impact on supply. Since this PNM have come into office, the stress and frustrations faced by farmers have resulted in an overall cutback in their production levels. Farmers are simply not producing as much as they were producing before, and the blame lies squarely on the incompetence of the Rowley-led government and his sleeping Minister of Agriculture, Clarence Rambarat. Just imagine, last year Clarence had access to a 500 million stimulus package. This was to be utilized for agriculture, but he failed to make use of over 84% of that funding, over 420 million, because he simply does not have a plan, brothers and sisters. Monies that could have been used to repair agricultural access roads, to provide the cleaning of the water courses, to avoid flooding, etc., was not utilized by Clarence. He has no plan and no clue about what is required to stimulate the agriculture industry here in Trinidad and Tobago. But I ask you this evening, do you know who has a plan? Yes, the UNC has a plan, my brothers and sisters. If one looks on at our economic transformation master plan that the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar so brilliantly launched almost 2 years ago, you would see many of our UNC ideas being copied and pasted by the PNM appointed Roadmap to Recovery Committee. And even with that, Clarence has failed to implement any of those recommendations. He does not even have a plan to deal with the burning issue of land tenure for farmers. But in the same breath, this Rowley-led government wants farmers to pay property tax on agricultural properties. Tonight, I call upon the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, that if you and your government are serious about making agriculture a tax-free industry, and if you name man to declare no property tax on all agricultural land and buildings. Do you know, brothers and sisters, what would happen to the price of locally grown food in this country when our farmers have to pay property tax on their gardens, on their chicken pen, their duck pen, their goat pen, etc.? Do you think the price of chicken, bygone, tomatoes is high at this point in time? Well, just wait and see what will happen when the taxman steps in. Imagine an additional $500 million this Rowley-led government had to utilize last year for agriculture, but they were not, and they could not even get rid of the giant African snails that has covered more grounds in this country than the sleeping agriculture minister. The snails cover more of Trinidad and Tobago than this sleepy Clarence. Add to that, brothers and sisters, within recent time, constituents from Princetown, Maruga, Debe, Barakpo, Cedras, Capdeville, Mayaro have been under siege by this other pest, the locust. It has been weeks now that these residents have been plagued by swarms of locusts, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, feasting on foliage, leaving no farmland or kitchen garden spared. My colleague, the MP for Princetown, MP Barry Padarat, and myself, we have highlighted the plights of our affected citizens based on the casual and reckless statement by the Minister of Agriculture. Only yesterday, I read a release from his ministry, late in coming, of course. No doubt it was following the public pressure that shook the minister awake from his siesta. In it, they are asking stakeholders to track the flight path of locusts and locate the egg. However, in that same press release, they stated that locusts have the ability to change their behavior and migrate over long distance. So they want stakeholders, when they see a locust, follow the locust to find the egg, but in the same release, they're saying that the locust can migrate over very long distance. You hear craziness? Well, that comes from Crazy Clarence. Crazy Clarence has now come up with such a crazy plan. I say perhaps it would be best for him to go back to sleep and let someone else take charge, since our farmers are facing the same issues that they have been plagued with since Crazy Clarence have assumed office 6 years ago. Every time Clarence is called upon to account for his stewardship of this critical government ministry, which holds the key to our nation's food security, Crazy Clarence's response is always wholly irrelevant. Imagine, this is the same fella who said pepper spray is more deadly than a gun. You hear that? That name sorts of suit him. This minister of food insecurity chooses to slumber in ignorance, totally unconcerned, just like the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin. Maybe he and his government are indeed living in a fairy tale, whilst the rest of our country has to deal with the harsh realities that surrounds us. Why is it, brothers and sisters, that he has chosen year after year to ignore the plea of our farmers to find a solution to flooding? You remember the terrible Diwali flood that took place around this time in 2018? Well, 3 years later, our watercourses in central Trinidad and south Trinidad, even in my own constituency of Couva North, have not been cleared. This has resulted in flooding in areas that has never flooded before. In the Standing Finance Committee last month, Clarence acknowledged that the clearing of these watercourses was previously done by Caroni 1975 Limited, which he, in fact, is responsible for according to line ministry responsibility published in the Gazette. This is now a clear dereliction of duty on the part of the minister, who by his own words has confirmed that he was responsible in part for the watercourse management. He went on in that same committee meeting to add that by law, the cleaning of watercourses fall under the responsibility of the Minister of Works. So this evening I ask, for how long will we see both Clarence and the Minister of Works blame each other, passing the buck from left to right as they dance their left foot, right foot balize, and our citizens continue to be affected by flooding all over Trinidad and Tobago, brothers and sisters? What we are facing in this country in the year 2021 is hardship that none of us would have ever thought was possible. But this is the reality of life under a Rowley PNM government, who feels they are above the law, above the people, unaccountable and answerable to no one and nobody. In 2021, brothers and sisters, when we should have seen some measure of progress over the past 6 years, we have areas of our country without pipe-borne water, while our citizens continue to suffer from flooding. We have farmers whose crops are being bulldozed because they cannot acquire land leases. We have fishermen who are being robbed and murdered while innocently plying their trade. We have government who would rather to pay Faris and family millions in rent than to release funds to our local government corporations so that our councillors will be empowered with the basic resources of material to repair our roads and our bridges, brothers and sisters. We have children without electronic learning devices, but lovely golf carts and golf courses where people are getting bounced down on. Brothers and sisters, I cannot stand by and see my country, our country, go down under this shameful, irresponsible, and uncaring Rowley-led government. This is why our political leader, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, the best Prime Minister that this country has ever seen, has launched a revolution of the people, a revolution for every citizen to be treated equally, a revolution to protect our fundamental rights, a revolution to protect our democracy from dictatorship, a revolution to protect our constitutional rights and freedom. As such, brothers and sisters, I call on you to join us in this revolution, the people's revolution, to speak out and to demand to be treated equally as we all deserve for the sake of our children and their future. Stand with us, brothers and sisters, and let us say no to tyranny, inequity, and injustice. On this week of Diwali, I take this opportunity to remind you that light will always dispel darkness and good will always triumph wickedness. May the blessings of Mother Lakshmi be with you and your family. And just as the darkest night comes to an end, the sun shall rise again. Long live our political leader, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa. Long live you, my brothers and sisters. I thank you.